Today we're going to be taking all of my Jurassic World Dominion figures and we're going to be putting them from biggest over here all the way to smallest down here. This figure right here is the largest Dominion figure that I have. This is the Dreadnoughtus figure and it is super long. It's probably 3 or 4 feet in length, but it still has some really cool features. You can even open and close the mouth and twist the head around too. So let's put this dinosaur on the very far left as the biggest dinosaur. Let's see, what super colossal figure is next? It's a tough call, but I think the Giganotosaurus might be the next largest. This figure is huge, has a classic green coloring, the awesome super sharp spine, and the really cool teeth. These are pretty unique. Let's set this super colossal Giganotosaurus down right next to the Dreadnoughtus figure. These are our 2 largest figures. Next up has got to be our super colossal T-Rex with the new brown and black coloring. You won't see this on older Jurassic World figurines. This one is super cool. Let's put this right next to our giant Giganotosaurus figure. Next is this awesome Atrociraptor figure. This one is the white with 2 different tones of brown striping along its back and sides. And unlike the other super colossal figures we've seen so far, the teeth are actually fully inside the mouth compared to the other figures we've seen so far where the teeth are on kind of like the outside of the mouth. All right, there we go. Let's move on to the next biggest, which is this tall Brachiosaurus figure from Jurassic World Dominion. Let me stand it up. Now this dinosaur is a lot taller than these other dinosaurs right here, but its body is a bit smaller and it's just shorter in size overall. So that's why I'm putting it over here. But it's got some pretty cool detailing, the blue coloring around its head. And next up in size is this giant Apatosaurus figure. Check out the size difference between this one and the Brachiosaurus over here. It's a little bit shorter, it's still standing on all 4 legs, and it has a really long neck, but instead of going up super tall like that one, this one kind of sticks out forwards more. All right, now we're moving on to our slightly smaller figurines. We're gonna start with this T-Rex, which has the identical coloring as the super colossal figure right over there. This is a really cool T-Rex. I like the features on this one, and this one has a ginormous head compared to older Jurassic World T-Rexes. Right over here, we've got the Hammond Collection Tyrannosaurus Rex figure. This one has some really cool orange-brown coloring. It has a lot more detail than many of the other Jurassic World T-Rexes. It even has marbled eyes. Check out all that texture. And these figures are super posable too, which is an awesome feature. Next, we've got this Thrashing Giganotosaurus figure in the same coloring as the super colossal figure over here. They look pretty similar. This one's quite a bit smaller, although it's still probably around a foot in length from tail to head. So let's set this down right next to the T-Rex figure. All right, what do we go with next here? I think next is this Allosaurus figure. This figure is a little bit smaller than the T-Rexes and the Giganotosaurus figure here, but it is a lot larger than a lot of my other Allosaurus figures. Plus it has a battle damage feature right on its side that you can open and close. Let's get this standing right next to the Giganotosaurus. The next up in size is the Therizinosaurus figurine, which was really cool in the Dominion movie. So we're gonna set this down right next to the Allosaurus figure. And check out those huge claws on its hand and the really long neck with the big face at the very top. We've got another herbivore dinosaur next in size here. This is the Stegosaurus with some pretty cool coloring. It's got the brown, some lighter tan, green, and then the clay red at the very top. All right, let's set it down next to the Therizinosaurus. Look at those spikes. They're a little bit taller than the Therizinosaurus, although if this was standing up all the way, it would definitely be a lot taller. Here is the Yangchuanosaurus figure. This, I don't think, was in the new Jurassic World Dominion movie, but it came out as part of the toy line. It's got some really cool coloring. It's got an action that lets you move the neck around in a lifelike way. And you know what? I think it is actually a little bit bigger than the Stegosaurus. So let's shift the Stegosaurus over and put this dinosaur right there. Next is a really interesting looking dinosaur. This is the Ankylosaurus. It's got the clay red coloring with the brown top, a super long neck, and it stands on 4 legs. Let's put this right next to the Stegosaurus figure. I can't quite tell which one is the next largest, but I'm gonna go with the Rajasaurus figure in the blue and gray coloring. And it's got that cool little spike right at the top of its head. Now let's set it right next to the Ankylosaurus. Let's see if it stands up. I think its legs are kind of broken, so that'll have to do. Here is the Sound Surge Giganotosaurus figure. Once again, it has pretty similar coloring as the super colossal figure right here, and this one comes with sound effects as well. It's pretty cool, so let's set this right next to the Rajasaurus figure. The next in size, I think, is this Pyroraptor figurine. This is the basic edition, but it still has the cool fiery red coloring and the black on its tail, on its legs, and a little bit on its head too. Let's set them down right here. And very close in size to the Pyroraptor is this basic Atrociraptor figure in the same coloring as the super colossal figure that we have back here. So let's go down all the way to the end and set them on the table. All right, now the figures are getting a little bit smaller. I think next up is the Megaraptor figure in the bright red and blue and a little bit of tan right along its face. And this figure is cool because it actually has an action when you press down on its back. It has a chomping action. Here is, I believe it's pronounced the Dryptosaurus. And a cool new feature that Mattel is putting on these toys is this little slide. It's like a thing that swings back and forth, and it actually swings their head back and forth and opens their mouth too, which is pretty cool. Now let's set it down right next to the Megaraptor. Next is the Hammond Collection Baryonyx figure. This one comes in the gray, dark blue with the yellow striping. And like all the Hammond Collection figures, is super posable and really cool. Let's put this down right at the end. Here we've got another Hammond Collection figurine. This is the Parasaurolophus. It's got some pretty bright coloring and of course is super posable and adjustable as well. Next is the bright Ichthyovenator. It looks kind of like a Spinosaurus because it has the big spine on its back and a long and narrow snout, but it has a super bright and much larger tail and is a lot smaller than a Spinosaurus, I think. So let's go ahead and put this down right next to the Parasaurolophus. Here we've got a huge Sinoceratops figurine with some bright yellow coloring around its all black eyes and the yellow coloring right on its tail as well. And like many of these other figures, it has the action that when you press down on its back, it lifts up its head. Let's see, next up in size is this Triceratops figure in the green and brown coloring. Let's put this at the very end. Oh, you know what? It looks like we're out of space at the very end though. So let's create a new row in the front, right up here. We've got another Triceratops figure next, but this one is from the Hammond Collection. So compared to this other Triceratops figure right here, you can see that this one has a lot more detailing and differencing in the color, because this one basically has two different colors. This one kind of fades into all sorts of other different colors. And of course, is a lot more posable as well. Next up is the Iguanodon figurine in the tan and darker brown on top with the striping. Let's set down this Iguanodon right next to the Triceratops. Now we're down to the really small ones. So let's start with this brand new one that I bought. This is the Geniodectes Cirrus dinosaur. All right, this dinosaur is pretty brightly colored. It's got a dark gray body, but then it has this super bright coloring along its leg, its neck, its face, and the super bright red on top. And this is the Extreme Battle Damage edition, so you can click it open and closed with that button on the top. All right, let's put this Geniodectes down right next to the Iguanodon. We've got a few more Extreme Battle Damage dinosaurs right here that are the same size. This first one is a Velociraptor, and I've also got an Atrociraptor figure. And they both have that button on the top that activates the battle damage on both sides of its body. Let's set these down next in line. I've got a couple more Atrociraptor figures right here. These are the non-battle damage versions. I've got an orange one with the tan striping, and then of course the white with brown striping, just like the giant super colossal version. Let's get this first Atrociraptor down, and the second one. Here is another Pyroraptor. This is a pretty small figure, and this one actually has the extreme battle damage on the side as well. Check that out, it's pretty cool. It's got the same classic red and black coloring along its body. And let's set it down right next to the white Atrociraptor. This next figure, I believe, is called the Moros Intrepidus. It's got some pretty unique green and orange coloring. It's got the light green eyes, some pretty cool feathering and detailing all over its body. And let's set it down as the next smallest dinosaur. All right, now we're getting down to the real small dinosaurs. These are both Dimetrodons, and their spines make them look really tall, but actually their bodies are really short. This first brown Dimetrodon is a normal one, doesn't have any special features, so we'll put that next in line. But this other Dimetrodon actually has battle damage on the side, like many of these other small figures, which is pretty cool. So let's set that down right there. And here are our last two dinosaurs. We've got a Miragaia dinosaur with the huge spikes on the side, and we've also got a Therizinosaurus figure, which is really small, but still has the giant claws and the classic coloring. All right, let's set these down. Looks like we have just enough space.
Dinosaurs, I am showing you my quadrupedal dinosaur collection, which means dinosaurs with 4 feet, and I'm going to be ranking them from the biggest all the way to the smallest. Let's get started with the largest quadrupedal that I have, which is this huge Dreadnoughtus figure. This dinosaur has the blue with the tan striping, and it has one of the longest necks out of any of my figures. So let's set this figure on the very left because this is my largest dinosaur. Next up in size is one of these Brachiosaurus figures. Let's first choose this one right here. It's got the classic brown coloring, and you can move its legs, its neck, and you can even open and close its mouth. Let's move this Brachiosaurus right next to the Dreadnoughtus. Check out that size difference between these two. Next up, we've got another Brachiosaurus figure, but this one is newer. This one is part of the Jurassic World Dominion collection. Now, its body shape is pretty much the same as this one right here, but you'll notice that it has some different coloring, and the best part of all is that it has this reflective blue coloring along its face. Next up in size, we've got this huge Apatosaurus figure. This dinosaur is quite a bit smaller than the Brachiosaurus figures, but it's still quite large. It has the green with the light green striping, and I'm sure you recognize this dinosaur from the Jurassic World Dominion movie. Let's keep going. I think the next biggest in size is this Amargosaurus figure. I think this figure's pretty old and that they don't make it anymore, but it's really cool because it has these two huge spines running down its neck and 2 action buttons, one to move the neck up and down and one to swing the tail back and forth. All right, let's set this down right next to the Apatosaurus. Wow, look at that size difference. Next up in size, let's go with the Jurassic World Dominion Ankylosaurus figure. This figure features the clay red and brown coloring. It's got tons of spikes all over its body, and it has the tail that controls the head and the chomping action too. Let's set the Ankylosaurus down next in line. Oh, those are pretty close in size. Next up, let's go with the Pentaceratops figure. This dinosaur has one of the largest frills that I've seen out of any dinosaur. Plus, it's got horns all along its frill and on its face too. And it has 2 action buttons, one to move the head up and down, and one to move the torso side to side. All right, let's set this down next to the Ankylosaurus. Next up in size, I think we gotta go with the Stegosaurus figures here. This first one has brown, it's got green, it's got the clay red coloring, and like all the other Stegosaurus figures, it has a tail swinging attack button. Let's set down this first Stegosaurus next to the Pentaceratops. And I think all these Stegosauruses are gonna be pretty similar in size, so let's just go with this one next. It's got the blue-gray coloring with the darker coloring along the top, and the pink underbelly, and of course the swinging tail attack. Let's get this Stegosaurus down next in line. This next one is brighter in color. It's almost a teal green color. It's still got a lighter underbelly, and it has some cool highlights right along its spine. This one will be our third Stegosaurus in line. And our fourth and final Stegosaurus of this collection is this gigantic Trackers Stegosaurus. And this is actually a very new figure. It's got some really cool coloring all over its body. Plus it comes with this crazy looking Dino Tracker backpack. Let's set it down as our fourth Stegosaurus. Next in size, I think, is this Diabloceratops figure. Check out these super huge horns on the top of its head and on the front of its face too. It's got a fiery red color over most of its body and the light tan underbelly. Plus there's an action button to swing its head back and forth. Let's put this down next in size. Up next, let's go with this Spinosaurus in the light gray blue with the tan detailing. And check out those super dark black eyes. That's pretty crazy looking. Let's put this one down next in line, and you can use the tail to move ahead too. I've got another Spinosaurus figure right here that is probably the exact same in size, but it's got different coloring. This one is the green with the tan detailing, and this one has some bright yellow eyes. So let's set this one down too, and look at that. This one also controls the head by moving the tail. It looks like we've got a few Triceratops figures up next. This first one has the dark brown with the two tones of blue along its back, and just like these Spinosaurus figures, you can use the tail to control the head. Let's go ahead and grab this next Triceratops figure with the gray and darker gray detailing along the top. But with this figure, instead of the tail that controls the head, there are two action buttons on its back. One controls the head for roaring, and the other controls its tail for swinging back and forth. Now let's set this down next in line as the second Triceratops. And this next Triceratops has some green coloring with brown along its frill and along its back too. And this Triceratops has an even different action. When you press down on its body, it does a roar, and it has sound effects too. Oh, you know what? I think there's another Triceratops here that I didn't even notice. This one has the clay red coloring with the brown detailing along the top and on the frill. And this one has one single action button on its back for the roaring action. This next quadrupedal dinosaur is a Kentrosaurus. It's got the spines running all along its back and these ginormous spikes coming right out of its sides. And this one has a pretty cool action that when you slide this back, it swings its torso back and forth to stab with those huge spikes. Now this dinosaur might be a little taller with its spines compared to the Triceratops, but we're gonna place it right here anyways. For the next up in size, we're gonna go with this dinosaur. This is the Edmontosaurus. Its front legs are smaller compared to its back legs. It's got some pretty cool coloring on its face and on that crown on the top of its head. And like many of these other cool figures that we've seen, you can use the tail to control the head. And it has sound effects too. Next, we're gonna go with this Iguanodon figure from Jurassic World Dominion. It's mostly tan, it's got some brown striping with the lighter streaks on the top. And with this figure, when you press down on its back, it has a chomping action. All right, next, let's go with this crazy looking dinosaur. This is a Sarcosuchus. It's got a long and narrow snout with tons of teeth. And the coolest part is that you can use the tail to control the head. The next dinosaur that we're gonna choose is this Ankylosaurus figure right here. This one is clay red, it's got some brown, and its spikes are a lighter color. And I think this one was from Jurassic World Dominion because when you press down on its back, it swings its tail back and forth. Let's go ahead and grab this next Ankylosaurus for our next in size. This one is a really old figure from Jurassic World. I think this one is from the first movie. And check out the size difference between the two. Next up, we've got two baby Brachiosaurus figures right here. And they each have their own unique color. This first one's gray, it's got some dark brown purple coloring along the top. And this other one is a much brighter color. It's a bright green with dark green right along the top. So let's set these down right next to the Ankylosauruses. Next in size, let's see, I think it might be this dinosaur, which I believe is called a Styracosaurus. It's got some super bright coloring along the front of its frill, which is really interesting, and it has some darker detailing along its back. Now let's set this down right next to the baby Brachiosauruses. I think next we're gonna go with this Miragaia figure from Jurassic World Dominion. Like the Kentrosaurus, this one also has some huge spikes sticking right out of its sides. Now let's set it down right next to the Styracosaurus. Next, why don't we go with this dinosaur? This is the Chialingosaurus. It looks somewhat similar to a Stegosaurus because it's got those spines in the top, but the spikes in the very back are quite a bit different, and it has these tiny little spikes coming out of its front legs. And let's set this one down next in line. Next, let's go with this crazy looking dinosaur. This is the Shringosaurus, and it's got a huge and very long neck. It's got those two evil looking horns on the top of its head too. Very wild looking. Let's put this next in line. For the next in size, why don't we go with this one? This is a Calavosaurus. It's got a dark blue body with some orange detailing. It's got some light blue stripes along its tail and on its mouth as well. And it looks like we're running out of space at the edge of the table, so we're gonna start a new line right in front. For our next in size, let's go with this baby Triceratops figure with extreme battle damage right on the side. And let's put this one down right next to the Calavosaurus. This next dinosaur, I believe, is called a Zuniceratops. It's got a pretty bright body, and it's got two horns on the front of its head. So let's set this down right next to the baby Triceratops. They look pretty similar. For our next one, why don't we go with this baby Stegosaurus figure? And you may notice that this baby Stegosaurus came as part of a set with this huge Stegosaurus right here. You can see that they're very similar in color. So let's set this down next in size, next to the Zuniceratops. And next we'll go with these two Dimetrodon figures. This first one is the older figure of the two, and this figure has an action that when you move its tail, it chomps its jaw open and closed. So we're gonna put that right there. And this other Dimetrodon figure is from Jurassic World Dominion, so it's pretty new. And it's got a much brighter spine, although it does not have any action buttons. So we're gonna set it down right next to the other one. Next up, it looks like we've got a Sauropelta figure. This is a pretty small figure, but it has some huge spikes on its back in comparison. It's really cool. So let's set this one down next in line. Here we have a small dinosaur. This is a Mosasaurus. It's got blue with some black detailing along the top and the yellow underbelly. And we'll set this down right here. And finally, we have two Minmi figures. This first one right over here is mostly green in color. Its spikes are more of a yellow color, but it has a ton of spikes along its back for protection. And this second Minmi figure right here is red in color, and its spikes are a bright white in contrast. But other than that, it is pretty identical to the other Minmi figure.
Today we're checking out a ton of my Jurassic World T-Rex figures, and we're gonna be placing them all along this table side by side from biggest to smallest. So let's get started with the biggest ones, the super colossal T-Rexes. This first one is custom colored, so it's got the light gray body. It's also got some bright and evil looking red eyes. So let's put this first super colossal T-Rex right on the edge because we're gonna need as much space as we can get on this table. Next, let's grab this other super colossal T-Rex. This is the bright orange and brown super colossal T-Rex, and I think that this first gray T-Rex over here might have actually been originally this orange color over here. So it has a lot of the same detailing with the skin. It's got the same mouth and teeth and the stomach compartment so you can feed this dinosaur. So we're gonna put it right next to this other super colossal T-Rex, side by side. Next, I've got another super colossal T-Rex, but this is actually the newest super colossal T-Rex that Mattel has released. This is the Jurassic World Dominion T-Rex. So it's got different texturing along its body, obviously a very different color. This is the black and brown. Many of the new T-Rexes from Jurassic World Dominion are colored in a similar way as this one. Let's put this right next to the other super colossal T-Rexes. All right, now we're moving down a size to the typical size for T-Rex figures for Jurassic World. This first one is the Hammond Collection T-Rex figure that came out very recently for Jurassic World Dominion. This figure has quite a bit of detailed coloring. You can check out those black stripes. You see that there's black spots all over its body as well. The texturing of the skin is pretty good as well, but the best feature of this T-Rex is how adjustable it is. You can bend its elbows, you can adjust its neck in all directions, even its knees and ankles. Look how many different joints there are that you can adjust. So this figure is very adjustable and is one of my next largest T-Rexes. So we're gonna put this right next to the Super Colossal. Look at the size difference between the two though. Next up, we've got another Jurassic World Dominion T-Rex. This T-Rex came out the same time as this Super Colossal figure, and check it out. They have some pretty similar coloring. Like I said, for the new movie, it seems that they're going with a much darker color scheme for the T-Rexes. Let's put this T-Rex right next to the Hammond Collection T-Rex. Next up, we've got a slightly older figurine. I think this one might be a Camp Cretaceous T-Rex, but this one is actually one of my favorite figures because of the function of the tail. You can use the button on its tail to open and close its mouth, plus you can twist the tail to move the head around in a super lifelike way. I really enjoy how they designed this T-Rex. So we're gonna put this T-Rex right next to the Jurassic World Dominion newest T-Rex. Next up, I forget its official name, but this is the Terran T-Rex. This T-Rex has two buttons on its back. The first and the most important one does a tearing action with its jaw. Look at how it twists its neck and closes its mouth at the same time, as if it's tearing off a huge piece of meat. There's also a second button for swinging the tail back and forth as well. This is a pretty similar size as this one, so we're just gonna put it right next to it. Right over here, we've got a custom colored camouflage T-Rex. This one is actually a much older figure as well, as it has some different features. You can use the tail to snap the neck up and down. Let's see if I can do it with one hand. Check that out. So you just lift up the tail and it has a snapping motion. And it also comes with sound effects for when you stomp on the ground. I don't think it works on this one anymore, but it has quite a few different features from all these T-Rexes over here. And it's around the same size, so we're gonna put this right next to that T-Rex. Next up is the Stomp and Escape T-Rex. Check out the coloring on this one. This one has splotchy gray coloring, which is a bit different compared to all the other smaller T-Rexes that we've seen so far. And the biggest feature of this T-Rex is the button on its back that lifts its head up for roaring. And it comes with sound effects as well. Plus, as you can tell from the name of the Stomp and Escape T-Rex, you can twist its tail. I don't know if I can do it with one hand, but you can twist its tail to stomp its feet up and down as well. All right, let's put this T-Rex right next to the Camo T-Rex. Looks like we've got some more bright orange T-Rexes coming up next. This is an old T-Rex figure from Jurassic World. I think this was one of the first ones that came out, and it looks totally different compared to these other figures. Let's check out these features. First, there is a stomping sound effect that you can activate just by stamping its feet down. And there is also a chomping action that you can press up its tail and then release its tail to have that chomping action, just like that, which is pretty cool. Totally different compared to these other newer figures. So let's see if we can put this T-Rex right next to the Stomp and Escape T-Rex. See if he stands up. This one's a little difficult to stand. There we go. Next up is one of my proudest T-Rex figurines from Jurassic World. This is a custom colored T-Rex that I did a month or two ago. This one has some of my favorite coloring. I really love green T-Rexes. And this figure is actually the Stomp and Escape T-Rex, which is the same as this T-Rex right here. So check out that color difference. This one is a lot more green. They both have the yellow underbelly, and this one has a lot whiter teeth as well. I'm super proud of this one, and I think this one actually belongs next to the Stomp and Escape T-Rex. So we're gonna move this one and put this one right next to that one. This is another bright orange and brown T-Rex, and check out how similar colored it is compared to this super colossal T-Rex right here. They are very similar, even with the eye coloring. And like many of the other T-Rex figures, this T-Rex has a button on the top of its head to open and shut its jaws. But it doesn't come with any sound effects or anything like that. And let's set this down right next to this slightly larger orange T-Rex. See if we can get him in a nice pose. All right, looking good. Here is another green T-Rex, my favorite color of a T-Rex. This one actually has some black stripes and splotches all along the top of its body, except for its tail, which is a bit weird, but it has it along the rest of its body. And just like the last T-Rex that we saw, this one has a button on the top of its head to open and shut its jaw. Let's set that right next to this other T-Rex that I think is the exact same size. All right, check it out. This is our first battle damage T-Rex of this entire collection. Check out the battle damage all over its body. It's got some on its chin, on its neck, all over on this side, and even on the tail as well. And I think this is the exact same size as these figurines right over here. And aside from the battle damage all over its body, I think the coloring is the exact same as this one right here. They look pretty identical to me. Moving right along, we've got another battle damage T-Rex. This is actually the newest extreme battle damage T-Rex from Jurassic World Dominion. And it has the battle damage on its side that you can turn on and off with the click of a button. That is super cool. Plus, it's got some really unique coloring for a T-Rex. I don't think I have any other T-Rex that has this coloring on the top and on the sides. It's a pretty unique orange kind of color. Let's set it down right next to the other first extreme battle damage T-Rex. And here is our last extreme battle damage of this collection. This is a much earlier extreme battle damage. You'll see that it has very different coloring compared to the Jurassic World Dominion figure. They both have that same battle damage feature on its side though, that you can turn on and off. Other than the coloring though, I think they're pretty identical in shape and in texturing. So let's put this right next to that T-Rex. Next up, we've got another custom colored T-Rex. I'm sure you've recognized this one from when I've shown it before. This is a super fiery red T-Rex with black on the top. It's got some flame-like things on the side and the super bright red on the sides and the bottom. This one is super cool looking and very unique, and I think it's just the same size as these other figures right here. This next T-Rex right here is pretty normal colored. I'd say it's a lot more realistic than some of these other T-Rex figures that we've seen so far. It's got the brown sides, darker brown on top, and the light underbelly. So it is a very stark contrast compared to this fire T-Rex right here. So let's set it down right there, and check it out. This one also has the button on the top of its head to activate the jaw. All right, we're moving on to a slightly smaller size. These are some older Jurassic World T-Rexes. I think these came out for the first Jurassic World movie. This one is a light tan T-Rex. Doesn't have too much coloring along its body. Does have some gray striping and shading along its head though. And it has an action button on its back to activate the jaw. And unfortunately, a bummer about these much older T-Rex figures from Jurassic World is it is really hard to make them stand up. So I actually have to pose them like this, so using the tail in the back to help them stand. But it is a bit smaller than all these other T-Rexes here too. Here we've got a similar shaped T-Rex. This is also a very old Jurassic World T-Rex. This one I believe is custom colored. Check it out, it's got that lime green underbelly, it's got some red and the black spots all along its top, and those yellow eyes too. All right, let's see if we can set this down right next to this other smaller T-Rex right here. There we go. This next T-Rex is even a little bit more special. This is a hybrid T-Rex, and it's also a much older Jurassic World T-Rex. So check it out. When you press this button, it activates the spikes on its back, and it also operates its jaw at the same time too. It's got some unique patterns along its body as well. It's pretty cool. Let's set this down right next to these other T-Rexes. All right, now we've got some especially small T-Rex figures. This next one is the Jurassic World Dominion Sound Surge T-Rex. So this one actually came out pretty recently, and it is a lot smaller, and it comes with sound effects that you can activate by pressing this button on the top of its back. That's pretty cool. Let's set this down next to these much older T-Rex figures, see if we can get it to stand. Next up is this brand new T-Rex figure that I bought for this video. This is the Funko Pop T-Rex figure for Jurassic World Dominion. Let's open it up. So here is the figurine. It's got the all black eyes, it's got those yellow teeth, a huge mouth, and the rest of its body is a brown color. It's got some cool detailing on its face, and of course it's got the light underbelly as well. Let's put this right at the end of the table next to the Sound Surge T-Rex. This figure is another old Jurassic World figure. It's much smaller than many of the T-Rex figures that I have. It's got the light green body, which I think is pretty cool. It's got some battle damage on the side, and it has an action that you can use the tail to move the head around and even open and close its jaws too. So for how small this figure is, it's actually pretty cool with the function. All right, it looks like we're running out of room on the edge of the table, so we're just gonna put this right in front here. We're gonna start a smaller little line up front. Here's another old Jurassic World figurine, another super small T-Rex. It's got a tan body, the same battle damage on the side, and the same function with the tail to operate its jaw and its neck. So you'll see that this figure is actually identical to the bright green one, aside from the coloring. All right, now we're on to the really small T-Rexes. This one is actually a baby T-Rex with a bandage on its leg and a strap around its mouth so that it doesn't bite the humans. This figure is super adjustable. Look, you can adjust the elbow, you can adjust the knees, the ankles, and it's got a rubberized tail, so you can actually bend the tail as well, which is really cool. And we're gonna put this all the way down at the end of the line with the smallest T-Rexes. Next up is another baby T-Rex with slightly different coloring. It's got a yellowish green coloring with the darker detailing along the top, and it has an action using its tail. You can open and shut its jaw. Let's set this baby T-Rex down right next to the other baby T-Rex. And these final two and smallest T-Rex figures from Jurassic World are the smallest T-Rexes that I have in my collection. Check out this first one. It's more reflective. It's got some silver on top and the brown on the sides, and you can actually open and close the jaw manually. And this figure right here is in more of a roaring pose. And it's got the all orange, a little bit darker orange on top, but you can't open and close the jaw on this one. And these are both super tiny, so let's put them at the very end of the table next to the baby T-Rexes.
Today we're going to be checking out some of Jurassic World's most popular dinosaur figures, and we're going to be standing them side by side from biggest to smallest right over here. And we're going to get started with the largest ones, the first of which is this giant Indominus Rex figure. This figure is probably almost 2 feet from the tip of its nose to its tail, and it stands over a foot tall, and it's got huge arms compared to T-Rex figures, and it's got some awesome detailing along the back as well. Let's put this one right on the far corner. The next biggest figure in this collection is this Hammond Collection Tyrannosaurus Rex figure. This figure is a little bit bigger than a lot of my other T-Rex figures, and it has a ton more detailing on its body. Plus, they made this figure way more adjustable. It has 3 points of articulation in its torso and its neck, 2 points of articulation in its tail, can even bend the elbows, and it's just really cool and realistic looking. So let's put this next to the Indominus Rex figure. Let's see, next up is probably this Jurassic World Dominion Tyrannosaurus Rex figure. It looks a lot different compared to the Hammond Collection. It's a lot darker. This one has marbled eyes. This one has painted yellow eyes. And on this T-Rex figure, its head is ginormous compared to a lot of the other T-Rex figures. And of course, it's got an action button on its tail for the chomping and roaring too. Let's put this right next in line. See now, the Hammond Collection T-Rex is a bit bigger than this normal Dominion T-Rex in terms of height, but this one does have a much larger head, as you can see.
All right, what's next? I think this giant Giganotosaurus figure is the next biggest figure. And this Giganotosaurus has two main action buttons. The first swivels its entire torso back and forth, complete with sound effects. And the second button, underneath its tail, opens and closes its jaw. You know, I think this Giganotosaurus is actually bigger than this T-Rex right here. So let's have them switch places. Next up, let's see, I think it's this T-Rex that is the next largest. I believe this is a Camp Cretaceous Tyrannosaurus Rex, and is one of my favorite because of how you can move its neck and its head around to look super lifelike. And this one is definitely a little bit smaller than the Dominion T-Rex, so I think they'll go side by side. Here we've got a big Spinosaurus figure, and in real life, the Spinosaurus is actually the largest carnivore, but in terms of the figure, it's actually a bit smaller than some of these other figures right here. And this figure is actually the Legacy Collection Spinosaurus. So this one's actually pretty hard to find nowadays. And although the spine is a little bit taller than that T-Rex, they're generally around the same size. So we're just gonna put this Spinosaurus right here. Right over here, we've still got another T-Rex figure. This is a Legacy Collection Tyrannosaurus Rex, and it is one of the few T-Rexes that I have that is in this really cool camo green color. This one is definitely a little bit smaller than this Spinosaurus right there. Now we're getting down to a little bit smaller figures. I think the next biggest size is the Therizinosaurus figure from Jurassic World Dominion. This figure has some huge claws, and I think this dinosaur might have the biggest claws out of any dinosaur that I've seen. But interestingly, it is a herbivore dinosaur. And we're gonna set it down right next to the Legacy Collection T-Rex. The next biggest dinosaur in this collection is the Scorpius Rex, which I'm sure you recognize from Camp Cretaceous Season 3. This figure has two action buttons. The first is for its jaws and sound effects, and the second is the claw slashing action. It's really cool, and a little bit smaller than the Therizinosaurus figure. We're gonna put it down right beside it. Actually, now that they're side by side, I think the Scorpius Rex is a little bigger, so let's have them swap places. All right, next biggest is probably this Carnotaurus figure. I think this is an older Carnotaurus, might be from the Fallen Kingdom collection. It has a jaw snapping action right on its back. Let's put this right next to the Therizinosaurus. Next up, in terms of the tallest dinosaur, I think is probably this Albertosaurus figure. I actually have a battle damage edition of the Albertosaurus, but this one is just the normal one, and you can use its tail to twist its neck around and open and close its jaw. Since we're running out of room on the edge of the table over there, we're gonna start a new row right up front here. Next up is the Pyroraptor figure. This is the basic Pyroraptor from Jurassic World Dominion. It's got the same awesome coloring, but pretty limited in terms of its movement. Here we've got another Scorpius Rex figure from the Camp Cretaceous collection. This one is actually a lighter green than the other Scorpius Rex. You can see that that one's like mostly black, but this one's got a lighter green on the sides. This figure is a bit smaller than the other Scorpius Rex. And now this Scorpius Rex actually looks a bit bigger than this Pyroraptor figure, so we're gonna have them switch places. Next up is another Giganotosaurus figure. This is the Sound Surge Giganotosaurus. As I'm sure you can hear right now, it is a whole lot smaller than this Giganotosaurus figure right here, and a little bit smaller than this Pyroraptor figure. I'll put them right beside each other. Let's see now. Next up, let's go with this Stegosaurus. This is a Jurassic World Dominion Stegosaurus, and I am loving the new color design on this. And with those huge spines on the top, it's a little bit taller than these other dinosaurs, but in terms of size, I'd say it's pretty close. So we're gonna put it right there for now. Right over here, next up in size, is the Ichthyovenator dinosaur from Jurassic World. This is a super bright dinosaur, and we're gonna set it down right next to the Stegosaurus figure. Here is a classic Baryonyx figure with the button on its back to activate its jaw. So why don't we put this dinosaur down as the next in line of the biggest. Over here, we've got the Hammond Collection Triceratops, and this also is quite a new figure that I bought recently. I am loving the texture and design of this, although the coloring is a bit plain, I would say. Let's put this down right next to the Baryonyx figure. For the next up in size, why don't we go with this new Jurassic World Dominion Triceratops figure. Let's open it up. So this figure has a lot of the classic camo green coloring, and it's got some clay red brown coloring along the top. So let's set this down right next to the Hammond Collection Triceratops. For the next up in size, let's go with this new one that I just bought, the Jurassic World Dino Trackers Cretaceous figure. Let's get this opened up. All right, here is the new figure. It's obviously an aquatic dinosaur. I think this one came out very recently. And it has a button on its back so you can twist its head back and forth and even open and close its mouth too. Let's set this down right next to the Triceratops. Just a few left. Next up in size is this Ankylosaurus figure with the clay red and brown coloring and tons of spikes on its body. Plus, when you press down on its back, it swings its tail back and forth. This figure right here is an extreme battle damage Velociraptor. You can actually turn the battle damage on and off just with the click of a button. I've also got an extreme battle damage Pyroraptor figure with the same feature on its side. You can click the damage on and off. And let's set that down right next to the raptor figure. All right, here are our last three. This is an extreme battle damage Dimetrodon figure with that same click action battle damage on both sides. This is also a super bright dinosaur. And we're actually gonna set this down right in front of them in the very front row. And here is what might be the smallest Therizinosaurus figure by Jurassic World that they've made. I'm actually not sure, but this figure is teeny tiny. Let's put this right next to the Dimetrodon. And last of all, we've got the Jurassic World Dominion WowPods Dilophosaurus figure. Let's get this opened up and let's check it out. Here it is out of the box, so you can see the whole Dilophosaurus face and the frills, and it's actually battery operated. So there's a motion sensor up here that'll turn on these lights, and it might be a bit too bright in here to actually see it, but it kind of changes the color of the Dilophosaurus. And the cool thing about these is that when you get more of these WowPods, you can actually stack them on top of each other and arrange your own way to display them. So we're gonna set this down right in the corner next to the Therizinosaurus figure. Today we're going to be checking out a collection of some of my scariest carnivore dinosaurs from biggest to smallest, and we're going to be putting them up over here to check them out side by side. So let's get started with the biggest one, the Indominus Rex. This figure is absolutely massive. It is larger than a lot of my T-Rex figures, and this is actually the battle damage edition. See, it turns red when you press the button, which is really cool. Plus, the rest of the body is very adjustable. You can move all its arms, its legs, you can adjust its neck, and it even has a button on its tail to activate the jaw. So let's go ahead and set the Indominus Rex down at the edge right over here. Moving on, let's see what the next largest dinosaur is. Probably the Giganotosaurus. This is another super large figure. It's got the green body with the black detailing all over, and it has a few actions actually as well. The first action is a button on the top of its tail that activates the swinging action with its entire upper torso. And there's also a button beneath its tail to activate just the jaw alone. All right, let's put this Giganotosaurus down right next to the Indominus Rex. And look at the size difference even between those two as well. That's pretty crazy. All right, next up, let's see. I bet it's one of the T-Rexes, and it's probably the Hammond Collection Tyrannosaurus Rex figure. This figure has some awesome coloring and shading and is the most posable out of basically all my T-Rex figures. And an interesting feature of the Hammond Collection is the realistic parts of its mouth. It's got these flaps on its side that are rubber, so they actually move around pretty realistically. The tongue is also rubberized as well. Let's put this Hammond Collection T-Rex right next to the Giganotosaurus. All right, I bet the next biggest one is this other T-Rex figure. This is a Jurassic World Dominion T-Rex. It's got some brand new coloring. It's got the orange-brown color and some gray detailing on the top. And this is actually an extreme battle damage T-Rex. You can press the button to reveal the damage on its side, just like that Indominus Rex over there. So, since this is the next biggest T-Rex, let's put it down right next to the Hammond Collection T-Rex. All right, looking pretty good so far. Next up in size is this Allosaurus figure from Jurassic World Dominion. This is the largest Allosaurus figure that I have, and it actually has some battle damage on the side. Let me show you that. Right here, you see it's hidden completely right now, but then you can click it down to reveal the ribs, and then you can even lift those up to reveal the intestines inside. This is really cool, and the only Allosaurus that I have that can do that. Plus, it has an action button on its back to activate the jaw. Let's put this Allosaurus down right next to the extreme battle damage T-Rex. Let's see, what's next biggest in size? I think it might be this Indoraptor right here. This thing's pretty large. It's got the all black body with the iconic gold stripe down its side. And this one actually has a few actions. You can see there's a little button on its tail right there to activate its arms. And there's a button at the bottom of its tail to activate its jaw too. All right, let's set this Indoraptor down next to the Allosaurus. That Allosaurus is quite a bit larger. All right, let's keep digging. I think this Carnotaurus might be the next largest size. It's got some battle damage on its nose, and it is the darker brown version of the Carnotaurus. And it has the action button on its tail to activate the jaw as well. Let's set it down. You know what? I think it might be larger than the Indoraptor, so let's go ahead and have them switch places real quick. There we go. That's looking better. Over here, we've got another Carnotaurus figure, but this one is smaller than the one that I just showed you, and it is a bit more brightly colored. It's a brighter red, it has the light underbelly, and then the black detailing on the top, and it has an action button on its back instead of its tail to activate the jaw. All right, let's set it down right next to the Indoraptor. Let's see, I think the next biggest carnivore in this collection is a Tarbosaurus. And this is definitely a scary looking carnivore. Check out that red underneath its chin and those red eyes too. And all those spikes, those are massive. Let's put this down right next to the Carnotaurus. Check out all those dinosaurs we have so far. Super cool. All right, let's see, next in size, maybe this other Allosaurus figure right here. This Allosaurus has a slide lever action on its back, so you get a bunch of different sound effects with it. You can get a growl all the way to a roar. All right, let's set this dinosaur down right next to the Tarbosaurus. And it is quite a bit smaller than the Tarbosaurus. Next up, I think, is the Giganotosaurus. This is the Sound Surge Giganotosaurus, so a whole lot smaller than the one that we saw earlier, but it has the same coloring and detailing, and it has sound effects that you can hear that you can activate by pressing this button up top. All right, let's set it down right next to the Allosaurus. They're actually pretty similar in size, so it might be a little hard to tell who's larger, but I think it's still the Allosaurus. Next, I think, is a Pyroraptor figure. This is the new Jurassic World Dominion version, and it is the basic version as well, so you can't open and close the jaw, but you can move the arms, the legs, and the tail a bit. Let's set this down right next to the smaller Giganotosaurus figure. Next up in size in the scary carnivore collection is the Megaraptor. This thing has some super bright coloring. You can tell that it is a feathered dinosaur. You can see some feathers on its legs, on its tail, on its arms. It's pretty cool. So let's set this down right next to the Megaraptor. Next up is this slightly smaller Endoraptor, a bit smaller than the earlier version that we saw, but it has the same coloring, and this one actually does not have any action buttons, but it is superposable. Let's put this down next to the Megaraptor. Next in size, we've got the basic Atrociraptor figure from Jurassic World Dominion. This has the white body with the brown striping all over and those bright red eyes. Let's put this down next to the smaller Endoraptor. Here is an Amber Collection Velociraptor. I can't remember which Velociraptor this is, but it has the brown coloring with the darker striping all over its body. Looks like we're running out of room on the edge there, so we're gonna create a new row right up in front here. Next is this much smaller Indominus Rex figure. This is an earlier version of the Indominus Rex compared to this one way over here on the edge, and look at that size difference too. And actually, I think this smaller Indominus Rex has a slightly more blue tone than the super large one. It's pretty cool. Let's put this down right next to the Amber Collection Velociraptor. For the next smallest scary carnivore, I've actually got this brand new one from Jurassic World Dominion. This one I believe is pronounced Aquilnosaurus. Let's open it up. So this is a pretty interesting looking dinosaur, and it's actually an extreme battle damage edition that you can see on the sides. Just click this button, and there you go, you reveal the damage underneath. Plus you can pose its neck, and I think you can even open and close its mouth too. There we go, that's pretty cool. Let's put this down next to the Indominus Rex. The next up in size of scary carnivores is this extreme battle damage Pyroraptor. Just like the dinosaur that we just saw, there's a button on top that activates the battle damage. Plus, the rest of its body is posable as well. And check out the size difference from this Pyroraptor to this basic Pyroraptor right there. A huge difference in size. Let's put it down right up front here. All right, now we're getting down to the really small ones. Here is a super small Atrociraptor figure. It has the same color as the basic Atrociraptor that we saw earlier, but is a whole lot smaller. So let's put this right next to the Pyroraptor. And I've actually got one more Atrociraptor figure in here with totally different coloring. This one is a bright orange with tan stripes on its body, and it's got some yellow, evil looking eyes. So let's put this right next to the smaller Atrociraptor right in front. And it looks like we've got a few Velociraptor figures in here. This first one is Velociraptor Blue with the iconic blue striping down both sides of its body. So let's put Velociraptor Blue right next to the orange Atrociraptor. And this other Velociraptor that I've got in here is a brown and yellow Velociraptor. It's pretty similar to Velociraptor Blue, but different coloring, and it's got some reflective green eyes. That's pretty cool. Let's set this one down. And finally, I've got some super small Jurassic World scary carnivore figures in here. Let's put these on the table and check them out one by one. I think the first largest is probably this Baryonyx. I think it's a Baryonyx figure. It's all green in color, so not a whole lot of difference with the coloring, but it's got a decent amount of texturing. Let's put this next to the larger Velociraptor. Next up in size, let's see, I think is probably this Velociraptor figure. This one has two different colors on it, even though it's so small. Oh no, actually three. It's got a pink tongue and the two tones of gray on its body. That's pretty cool. Let's put it down next to the Baryonyx. Next up is the Carnotaurus figure. I got this one pretty recently in a pack, and you can actually open and close its mouth. Let's set this one down here. And last of all is this Baryonyx figure that actually came in the same pack as this little Carnotaurus. Let's put them side by side, and it is a bit smaller. All right, we're finished. Today we're checking out all of my Indominus Rex figures from Jurassic World, and we're gonna be putting them side by side from biggest to smallest. So let's get started with the biggest one, the super colossal I-Rex figure. This figure is probably over 3 feet from the tip of its nose all the way to its tail. So this one is ginormous. Next, we've got the Destroy and Devour I-Rex, but this one is actually custom colored with the blue, the purple, and the orange striping, and my favorite part, the bright green eyes. And it has some action buttons. The first operates its arms, and the second operates its jaw. So let's set down this I-Rex next to the super colossal version. Look at that size difference. Next up, we've got another Destroy and Devour I-Rex, but this one is not custom colored. This is actually the coloring that it originally came in. It's got the classic darker coloring around its orange eyes. It's got plenty of texturing and spikes along its back, and of course the same action buttons on its back to operate its arms and its jaw too. And check it out, there's even some space in its mouth that it could probably fit a few miniature dinosaurs inside of its mouth. The next I-Rex that I've got is the Extreme Battle Damage Edition. You'll see that it's a pretty similar size to these other Destroy and Devour figures, but this one, instead of having a button that activates its arms, it has a button that activates the damage on the side with sound effects. Other than that, you can see it's got very similar coloring to the Destroy and Devour I-Rex, and of course it's got the button on its tail to activate the jaw. Next up, I've got a really unique looking Indominus Rex figure. This one was actually made by Hasbro, and this is a hybrid Indominus Rex figure. It's got tons of red all over its body and like lightning strike patterns almost. It's got a button on its side to activate the spines coming out of its back, and you can move its arm to activate the motor that opens and closes its mouth too. Plus, check out these extra teeth inside its mouth that you can actually like kind of move around. I think they flip up when its mouth is open. It's pretty different compared to the Destroy and Devour and all those other I-Rex figures. And let's see if we can stand this one up. It doesn't stand up too well usually. I might have to lean it against that other one. There we go. Next up in size is actually another I-Rex by Hasbro. This is the Indominus Rex that I believe was made for the first Jurassic World movie. And this one is quite a bit different from the Destroy and Devour ones because it's got a rubber neck. You can see its whole front face and its neck is like a rubber. And you actually open and close its mouth by moving its arms up and down. So it's kind of spring-loaded. And this I-Rex is definitely smaller than the hybrid I-Rex. So we're gonna put this as the next biggest dinosaur, next in line. Next up in size is another figure made by Mattel. This Indominus Rex is very different looking compared to what we've seen so far entirely. It's got huge orange eyes, it's got some blue spike detailing running down its back, and it's got a really unique attack feature as well. What you do is you move its tail up and down, and it actually swings its head in a circular motion all over, and it has some chomping actions as well. It's pretty wild looking. All right, let's put this interesting looking Indominus Rex right next to the Hasbro one. All right, now the figures are getting a little bit smaller. This is the Feeding Frenzy Indominus Rex from Hasbro. It's got some huge orange, yellow, and red eyes. It's got a ginormous head and a smaller body, and this figure actually has a few functions. You can use the tail to open up the mouth, and then when you have a piece of meat, which I couldn't find unfortunately, you place it in its mouth and it clamps its mouth shut. Plus, there is a button on the top of its head right here to activate more sound effects. Now this next figure is not officially from Jurassic World, but it is an Indominus Rex. This one is actually a model Indominus Rex made by some other brand. I can't remember the name of the brand. So this figure does look quite a bit different compared to the Mattel versions and even the Hasbro versions, but it still looks like an Indominus Rex. Next in size is another older I-Rex figure. I believe this one was by Hasbro as well. It's quite a bit different in size compared to the Destroy and Devour dinosaurs. It's got some battle damage on the side that you can open and close, and you can use the tail to chomp its mouth down too. So let's get this one next in line. This next one I believe was called like a Bite and Thrashers or something like that, and this one is pretty small. This one has some battle damage painted right on the side. and you can use the tail to move the head around and chomp its jaw as well. And this one is quite a bit smaller compared to the one that we just saw too. Look at that. And my last 3 I-Rex figures are all really small, so let's go take these down to the edge of the table. This first one is a Lego I-Rex. I believe it's a pretty old version, which is pretty cool. It's got the red eyes and some cool gray detailing and coloring on the sides. So let's stand this one up. Our next biggest is this silver reflective Indominus Rex, which is pretty cool. And I believe this one is by Mattel as well. So let's put this right next to the Lego I-Rex. And finally, the smallest I-Rex that I have is this clear Indominus Rex. It's got some really amazing detailing with the texturing despite how small it is. And of course it doesn't have any coloring because the whole thing is completely see-through. So let's put this at the very end. This is my vintage Jurassic Park figure collection, and today we're gonna be ranking them from biggest over here all the way to the smallest on the other side. Let's get started with the biggest one. This is JP28, the Bull T-Rex. This figure has some pretty unique coloring. It's very different from Jurassic World's newer T-Rex figurines, and we're gonna place it at the very edge as our biggest dinosaur. The next biggest is another T-Rex figure. This is JP09. This is a clay red T-Rex. It's got the rubbery skin and it's got a tail that you can wiggle back and forth to move its head. So let's put this down as the next biggest T-Rex. Next up in size, yet another T-Rex. This is JP29. This one has more of a camouflage coloring and you can use the tail to move the head back and forth. Now this figure's really old, so let's see if we can set this down one way or another next in line. I think that's the only way that it'll stand up because it's so old. Up next is our final giant T-Rex of my vintage Jurassic Park collection. This is actually an RC T-Rex from The Lost World. And this figure is really old. It's not holding up too well anymore, but it's still one of my largest, so let's put this next in line. This vintage figure is the Utah Raptor. It's a lot larger than a lot of the other raptor figures that I have, and it's got an interesting spotted design, almost like a cheetah in a way, which is interesting. Let's set this down as the next biggest in the collection. Up next is a Pachycephalosaurus figure. This figure actually has a spring-loaded headbutting action, but unfortunately it's broken, so if I pressed it, the head would go flying. But for now, let's go ahead and set this as the next biggest dinosaur in the collection. This next figure is a Velociraptor. It used to be battery powered, and it's from the 3rd Jurassic Park movie. Let's set this next in line. And actually, I think it might be a little bit bigger than the Pachycephalosaurus. So let's have them switch places. Right over here is a juvenile T-Rex figure. It's got a huge chunk of battle damage right on its side, and its whole body is a soft rubber. This is the Allosaurus figure, and it's got battle damage all over its body, on its stomach, on its leg, and on its tail too. That is a ton of battle damage. Let's set this down next in line. Let's see, the next biggest Jurassic Park dinosaur, let's try this one. I believe that this is another Velociraptor figure, and it's got the black striping all over its body. This is the JP18 Velociraptor, so let's set this down next in line. Up next is the Triceratops. This figure has the huge chunk of battle damage right on the side, and you can squeeze the stomach to lift the head up and down. All right, let's put this next in line. This next dinosaur is a crazy looking dinosaur. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it is the JP53 figure. It's got some crazy winged-like things right on its arms. So let's set this down right next to the Triceratops. This is the Parasaurolophus figure, JP19. It has a button on its back that you can use for a running feature. Next up, we've got a bunch of baby dinosaur figurines that originally came in these huge eggs. Let's go ahead and set these in line. I think this one might be a velociraptor, this one's a triceratops, and this one might be a T-Rex. This next figure is JP58, the Amargospinus, and it's got some crazy spikes that open up on its neck. And you can open and close its jaw too. Up next is the JP49. I think this one was called the Compsognathus. This is a crazy looking dinosaur, and it has a crazy feature that when you press this forward, it shoots its tongue or whatever that is right out of its mouth. Over here, we've got a few Baryonyx figures. This first one is brown with the orange striping. And this other one is the yellow and brown with the black spots on top. We're getting down to our last few. I've got some Velociraptor figures right here. This one is the JP10 with the orange and red coloring. Let's go ahead and get that in line. And also the JP05 Velociraptor with the brown and black coloring. Here is the Chasmosaurus figure, JP21. This figure has a feature that when you press on its leg, it lifts up its head. And right here, we've got a baby Triceratops figure, JP44. It's a little bit smaller than the Chasmosaurus. And finally, we've got a baby T-Rex figure, JP42. Here it is. Today we are checking out some of the best and coolest carnivore figures from Jurassic World and ranking them from biggest over here all the way to the smallest over here. So let's get started with the biggest one, this super colossal custom colored T-Rex. This T-Rex has some fiery red coloring and is one of the brightest super colossal figures that I have. So let's put this at the very end as our biggest. And I've got another super colossal figure in this collection. This one is the Giganotosaurus. This figure has some reflective gold eyes and some of my favorite teeth on any Jurassic World figure. The next largest carnivore in this collection is this custom colored Indominus Rex. Just like the super colossal T-Rex over there, this one is colored super bright and very artistically rather than realistically. So let's set this down next in line. Next up, I've got another Indominus Rex figure, but this one is colored a lot more realistically. And this one is actually the original coloring of this custom painted one right over here. So they are actually identical in size. Next up is one of the coolest carnivores that I have. This is the Hammond Collection Tyrannosaurus Rex. This figure came out pretty recently, and this carnivore is one of my favorites because of how posable it is and how much more detail there is to its entire body. Next up is another Giganotosaurus figure. This one is nearly identical to the super colossal Giganotosaurus in its color and its details, but this figure actually has a few features. The first is a torso swinging action, and the second is a jaw chomping action. So let's set it down next in line. This next one is a T-Rex figure. This is actually a Terran T-Rex. Check it out, it's got two buttons on its back. The first activates the Terran action, and the second button swings its double jointed tail. This is a pretty massive T-Rex figure, so let's set this next in line. I've got another T-Rex right over here. This one is the Camp Cretaceous T-Rex. It's got some pretty realistic coloring all over its body, and it's got a button on its tail to activate the jaw with sound effects and roaring. All right, let's get this one next in line. Let's see here, the next one in size might actually be this brand new one right over here. This is the Sound Surge Indominus Rex. Let's check it out. So this Indominus Rex is quite a bit smaller than the one that we saw earlier. Check out the size difference here. It has similar coloring though. And the best part, of course, are the sound effects. Moving on to the next biggest carnivore, I think is this Yangchuanosaurus figure. And instead of sound effects on this figure, it has a button on its tail to activate the jaw. Check it out, I've actually got another sound surge dinosaur in here. This is the Carnotaurus edition. And let's check out those sound effects too. Very cool, let's set this down next in line. This figure right here is a newer figure. I believe it's called the Nanotyrannus. And it's got two buttons hidden on its back. The first one activates its jaw, and the second one activates the tail. Next is another recently released dinosaur. This is the Eocarcharia. It's got the feather texturing all over its body and an action button on its back to activate the jaw. This figure was released as part of Jurassic World Dominion. This is a Scorpiovenator. It's got some pretty bright coloring and it's got an action where you press down on its back and it chomps. Next, from Camp Cretaceous, we've got the Scorpius Rex. This actually isn't the largest Scorpius Rex that I have, but it has some really cool dark green coloring and a yellow underbelly and fully adjustable arms, legs, tail, and head too. Way over here on the end, I've got the Ichthyovenator dinosaur. It's got the long, narrow snout, it's got the spine on its back, and it has the chomping action when you press down on its body. Here's another dinosaur that I bought recently. If I remember correctly, this is called a Dreadnoughtus, or something very close to that. It's got spikes all over its body, a little bit of bright blue on its face, and an action button on its back to activate its jaws. Let's set that down right next to the Ichthyovenator. Next up is a pretty vintage and hard to find Jurassic Park Allosaurus figure. This figure is pretty cool because it actually has battle damage that you can take off completely to reveal the insides. And I think this one is the next biggest, so let's put this next in line. Next in size, we've got the Hammond Collection Baryonyx figure. I've got tons of Baryonyx figures, but this one is probably one of my favorite because of how adjustable and posable it is. So let's start a new line right up here as the next in size. Over here, we've got an older Ceratosaurus figure. This one is the brown and orange version, and it's got the action button on its back to activate the jaw. Let's set this down right next to the Baryonyx. Over here is a crazy looking figure. This is the Rowdy Roars Dilophosaurus. Let's go ahead and turn on the power, and let's see what it does. So you can touch the button on its head, or you can tap its chin, and it'll walk around. This one right next to it is the Majungasaurus. It's got some bright detailing running along its neck and its head, and with this figure you can use the tail to move the head around in a real lifelike way. And finally, for this carnivore biggest to smallest collection is a Sarcosuchus figure. It's got the long narrow snout, and there's a button on its tail to open and close its mouth too. Today we're checking out Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom versus Camp Cretaceous, and we're going to be putting them all side by side on this super long table for a size comparison. So let's get started with the biggest ones from Camp Cretaceous. This first one is the super colossal Indominus Rex figure. This figure features some really cool looking teeth. It's got huge claws on its hands. It's got some cool detailing along its whole body, a ton of spikes along its back as well. This one is definitely the biggest, and we're gonna put this right here in the Camp Cretaceous line. The next largest is also from Camp Cretaceous, actually. This is Carnotaurus Toro. This is the super colossal figure. And this figure features the classic clay and brown coloring along the body, along with the battle damage right along its nose, and the two massive horns as well. Let's put this right next to the Indominus Rex on the Camp Cretaceous line. Unfortunately, Fallen Kingdom does not have any super colossal figures, but we'll get started with the biggest figures that I do have from Fallen Kingdom. This first one is a giant T-Rex, and this one features some pretty cool attack moves. If you move its tail, it lifts its head up for a roar, and if you move the tail downwards, it actually chomps it towards the ground. Plus, you can move it side to side to swivel the head too. So we're gonna put this first Fallen Kingdom dinosaur right here. All of our Fallen Kingdom dinosaurs will go along the front right here, and Camp Cretaceous will go along the back. Let's go ahead and grab another Fallen Kingdom dinosaur. This is another T-Rex, but this is the battle damage edition. You can see it has a lot of the same coloring along most of its body as the first T-Rex, but it's got some really cool battle damage coloring. You can see some slashes on its neck, on its chin, and all over its body. And it is a little bit smaller than the first T-Rex, so let's set him down right next to it. Moving on to the next largest Camp Cretaceous, we've got the Spinosaurus figure from Camp Cretaceous with the tan coloring. It's got the super long snout and some really big front arms. You'll notice that the arms on a Spinosaurus are a lot larger than on a T-Rex figure. Look how much bigger it is on a Spinosaurus. Now let's go ahead and set this Spinosaurus next in line on the Camp Cretaceous line. Look at that size difference between the super colossal figure and this Spinosaurus. That is a huge difference. Next from Fallen Kingdom, I think the next biggest figure is the Grab and Growl Indoraptor figure. This figure features super long front arms. It's also got a long tail and two attack buttons on its tail. The first activates its claws for slashing back and forth, and the second button activates the jaw. And you can see that its eyes light up as well. That is really cool. Let's set this down next to the battle damaged T-Rex. Going back to Camp Cretaceous, our next biggest dinosaur figure is this Carnotaurus figure. And let's check it out compared to the super colossal version way up there. Check out the color difference. This one's a lot darker brown. They both have the damage on their nose though, which is pretty cool. And this Carnotaurus has a button on its tail to activate its jaw too. From Fallen Kingdom, we actually have a Carnotaurus figure as well. This one is a little bit smaller compared to the Camp Cretaceous Carnotaurus. You can see the size difference right there, and the color difference as well. And this figure has a button on its back to activate its jaw and its neck as well. Next from Camp Cretaceous, we've got the Scorpius Rex figure. I think this is the largest Scorpius Rex figure that I have. It's got the yellow underbelly and the black sides and the darker black top. And this figure features some pretty cool attack buttons as well. One for the jaw and then one for slashing the arms too. Let's set this down next to the Carnotaurus. From the Fallen Kingdom toy line, we've got another Indoraptor figure that is slightly smaller than the Grab and Growl Indoraptor. It still has the same coloring and many of the same features, but this one doesn't have any attack buttons or anything like that, but it is super posable. From Camp Cretaceous, we've got an Albertosaurus figure with the green and orange coloring. This figure reminds me a lot of a T-Rex, but it's got some differences in some spikes on the top of its head, and I think the shape of this dinosaur's head is a little bit different than a T-Rex as well. So let's go ahead and put this on the Camp Cretaceous line right here, next in size. Next in size from Fallen Kingdom is the Suchomimus figure in the blue and yellow coloring. And it's got an action button on its back for the chomping or roaring action. This is a really colorful dinosaur. Let's put this right next to the Indoraptor figure. Next is the Camp Cretaceous Cryolophosaurus figure. This figure is also in a dark blue color, just like the Suchomimus, but it also has some orange along its back and its head as well. Next up is the Fallen Kingdom Allosaurus figure in the gray and yellow coloring. This figure features some cool detailing along the top of its head. It's got those really tall crown eyebrow-like things, and it's got an action button on its back for chomping its jaw open and shut. Let's set this down next to the Suchomimus. From Camp Cretaceous, we've got a Baryonyx figure in the two-toned green and the brown coloring along the top. This figure features a slide lever action to open and shut the jaw, along with a ton of different sound effects. Now let's put this on the Camp Cretaceous line. Here is the Fallen Kingdom Ceratosaurus figure. This figure has some red, yellow, and black on its body, and it features movable arms, legs, and a tail, and the button on its back to operate the jaw. For Camp Cretaceous, we've got another Baryonyx figure, also with the green and brown, but slightly different coloring. And this figure just has a button on its back to activate the jaw and the sound effects too. On the Fallen Kingdom side, we've got a Metriacanthosaurus figure with this dark yellow and green coloring. This figure features movable arms and legs, and it has a button on the top of its back to activate the jaw. All right, that's looking good so far. Next, for Camp Cretaceous, we've got the reflective Parasaurolophus figure. This figure features some really cool coloring. Look how shiny and reflective that is. It also has a tail that moves the head around, and there are adjustable legs on both the back and the front as well. This is the Fallen Kingdom Stegosaurus figure. It's in a teal bluish color. It's also got the lighter underbelly. And this figure features a slashing attack with its tail when you press down on its spine right there. Let's set this down next in the Fallen Kingdom line. For Camp Cretaceous, we've got a Sinoceratops figure in the green, tan, and kind of a darkish orange color. It's also got some yellow eyes, and this figure features a tail that activates the neck so you can move it around, and the sound effects as well. For Fallen Kingdom, I believe that this is a Sinoceratops as well. It looks quite a bit different, it has some different coloring, and some different horns on the front as well. And this figure features a button on its back that moves its head up and down. Here's another Sinoceratops figure, but this one is from Camp Cretaceous, and it's got some interesting coloring. The all black eyes, its body is mostly this light gray-blue coloring with some tan detailing all over as well. And this figure features the tail that you can use to move its neck around as well. On the Fallen Kingdom side, I've got another Triceratops figure in the clay orange coloring, and it's got brown detailing along the top. This figure features some huge horns on its face and an action button on its back for a slashing or a roaring action. And here is the last Triceratops of this video. This one is from Camp Cretaceous. It's got the brown and blue coloring, the huge horns in the front, and the tail that controls the head. Next in size for Fallen Kingdom is this Ankylosaurus figure. It's got the huge spikes coming out of its side, as well as the hard shell on top, and an action button along its back for swinging its tail back and forth. From Camp Cretaceous, we've got a Sarcosuchus figure with the purple, orange, red, and gray-blue coloring. This figure features a really long torso, a super long mouth, and some short stubby legs, as well as an action button on its tail to open and close the jaw, and to move its head around too. Now we're getting down to the real small figures. This is the Velociraptor blue figure from Fallen Kingdom. And this features movable legs, arms, and you can open and close its mouth as well. I've also got a Velociraptor from Camp Cretaceous here. This one is a green with darker green striping. And this figure actually features an attack button on its back that moves its claws back and forth. Let's put it right there on the Camp Cretaceous line. For Fallen Kingdom, we've got a Stygimoloch figure with the orange and purple detailing. And this figure has an action with its tail used for headbutting. And let's put this right at the end of the Fallen Kingdom line. I've also got a Stygimoloch figure for Camp Cretaceous as well. This one also has the clay coloring with the purple detailing, but this one does not feature an attack button with its tail to move its head back and forth for headbutting. And the last Fallen Kingdom figure in this collection is this extreme battle damage Herrerasaurus. You can see that you can open and close it right there on the side. And for our final dinosaur is the Monolophosaurus from Camp Cretaceous. This figure features an action where you can move its tail to open and close its jaw. All right, there is our entire Camp Cretaceous versus Fallen Kingdom, biggest to smallest. Let's check out all these Camp Cretaceous figures from big to small. And our Fallen Kingdom from biggest to smallest.
Today on Amazing Dinosaurs, we're gonna be checking out a huge collection of apex predators from Jurassic World and lining them up from biggest to smallest. So let's get started right over here with this super colossal T-Rex figure. This figure is featuring some custom gray skin and some bright red eyes, and I love the teeth on this figure. They're a lot darker than a lot of dinosaur teeth. So we're gonna put this one at the very left because it is the biggest one of this collection. Our next biggest apex predator in this collection is this super colossal Velociraptor Blue. This giant figure features some dark gray blue skin, it's got the iconic blue stripe running down the sides, and it has some white, shorter teeth compared to the T-Rex. Let's set it down right next to the super colossal T-Rex. All right, let's see. Next up in size is probably this Indominus Rex figure. This figure, although a little bit smaller than the Super Colossal, is one of the biggest predators that I have. And this one is actually the Battle Damage Edition that you can turn on and off with the click of a button. It also has an adjustable head and a button at the end of its tail that activates the jaw. Next up in size, we've got this awesome colored Spinosaurus figure. Now this figure was custom colored, which is why you'll see a lot more detail with the coloring and the shading compared to many of the other figures. Even the teeth are a much dirtier, nastier color, which I love. Looks totally realistic. Let's grab our next dinosaur, which is this huge Pyroraptor figure. Now this figure is actually pretty special because it is battery operated and it responds to you. So let's tap it on the head and see what happens. Look at that. Its eyes change, it's moving around. Looks pretty angry right now. And you can touch its chin as well. It'll respond to you there. It's pretty cool. Check that out. Now its eyes are green, which means it's more friendly. All right, let's set it down right next to the Spinosaurus. Next up in size is one of my proudest dinosaur figures in my entire collection. I actually custom painted this Stomp and Escape T-Rex. It's got some brown on the top, green on the sides, and then the light yellow underbelly as well. This for sure is one of my best repaints, and it's next in size, so let's put it down right next to the Pyroraptor. For our next biggest apex predator, we've got another T-Rex figure right here. This one is also in a green color. And it also has the black stripes on the top of its body and some on its face as well. And it has a button on the top of its head that you can use to open and close its mouth. Next up in size is actually a vintage figure from Jurassic Park. This is a Utah Raptor figure and it stands almost as tall as the Jurassic World T-Rexes. And this figure, since it's one of the old Jurassic Park ones, it actually has rubber skin, so it feels quite a bit different and looks a bit different too. It's a lot less shiny. Over here is one of my favorite apex predator dinosaurs. This is the Carnotaurus. I love the coloring on this dinosaur and I love the way it looks. It looks kind of like a T-Rex, but it's got some horns on the top of its head and it's got much smaller arms too. This is a totally awesome figure, so let's set it down right next to the Utah Raptor. Up next, let's see, I think it's probably the Carcharodontosaurus figure right here. This figure features a dark blue body with some orange and dark brown detailing, and it has a button on its back that you can press for the chomping action. Let's set this down right next to the Carnotaurus. Next up, let's go with the Albertosaurus figure. And this one is actually a special edition Albertosaurus because it has the battle damage right on the side that you can open and close. You can even move the ribs up and down too. And check that out, it's got some slashes on its body as well. Let's put this next in line. Next in line is an Allosaurus figure. And this figure features a slide lever button on its back to activate roars and to open and close the jaws too.
and it's pretty similar inside to the Albertosaurus, so let's put it right next to it. Next, I've got this Baryonyx figure with battle damage featured all over its body. It's got some on its leg, its neck, and there's an action button on its back to activate the jaw. Now, it's pretty close in size to an Allosaurus figure, but check out the difference in size between their bodies. The Allosaurus is way bigger. Check it out, I've actually got another Baryonyx figure. This one features the green, dark green, and brown coloring on its body. And it's got a slide lever action on its back to activate the jaw and the sound effects. And this figure is basically the same size as the Baryonyx right next to it. Check it out, we've got another T-Rex figure. This is the Sound Surge edition T-Rex from Jurassic World Dominion. So let's set it down right next to the Baryonyx figure, just a little bit smaller. Over here is a yellow Cryolophosaurus figure. Check out the crown on the top of its head. That's really cool. Plus, with this figure, you can use its tail to move its head around in a real lifelike way. All right, let's set it down next in size. This next figure is a Ceratosaurus figure in the dark green coloring with the black detailing on the top. And like many of the newer figures, it has a slide lever action on its back to activate the jaw and the sound effects. For our next Apex Predator, we've got our first Dilophosaurus figure of this collection. This is an older figure and it features an action when you move the tail, it moves its head back and forth. All right, we're getting down to the much smaller figures. This next figure is another old Jurassic World figure. This one is a T-Rex. It's got the bright green coloring with some battle damage on the side, and you can use the tail to move the head. This next Jurassic World Apex Predator is a Spinosaurus in some crazy coloring. It's got the bright red spine with stripes and the blue body as well. And check it out, there's even a little battle damage on the side too. Let's set it down right next to the T-Rex. This figure is the Jurassic World Dominion Extreme Damage Velociraptor. It's got a button on the top of its back that you can use to reveal the battle damage right on the side. Here is another Velociraptor figure. This one is a bit older than the Dominion Velociraptor that we just saw, and it has a soft green body with the darker green on top. Next, we've got an Atrociraptor figure that I'm sure you recognize from the new Jurassic World Dominion movie. Let's set this down right next to the Velociraptors. Our next Apex Predator is the Dimetrodon Dinosaur. This figure features a huge spine running along its back and adjustable limbs and jaw as well. We're gonna set this one up in front of the other line because we're running out of space. So let's go to our final dinosaur, which is a Snap Squad Carnotaurus. Once again, one of my favorite dinosaurs. Let's set this right at the end. Want to see more dino videos? Click the subscribe button now.